Yeah, you can get them up.
Yeah,
and we're good. That should start streaming to YouTube in 2 seconds. Wave to everyone. It's loading slowly. An error occurred. No. No, we're good. We're good.
Good evening, and thanks for joining the very first ProductTank Bristol remote. We're here from our homes in and around Bristol and beyond. So thanks very much if you're watching. Tonight it's myself hosting with Lily and Irving, who've done all the really hard work of organising tonight, to be honest. So I'm really just talking at you. And we've got our speakers, Rebecca, Phil and John. I'll explain a bit more about what they're going to be doing if I can get my slides to show, which doesn't seem to be working. So Evan, maybe you could just bring the slides up.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Let's also give some time for people to join as well.
Yeah. So I hope everyone's doing okay and isn't going stir crazy from working from home forever. It's like the world's longest snow day. What's been the best thing about working from home for you, Lily?
I think my favourite thing about working from home is teaching my 3 children, like schooling at 3 different ages.
Oh yeah.
And doing conference calls and cleaning the house all at the same time. It's just, I absolutely love it. It's the best thing ever.
Sounds totally awesome.
No, seriously though, one thing I do love is that I can like go for a run in the morning and then get home and just start working like pretty much straight away. That is good.
Yep. That is nice.
How about you, Darwin? What's your favourite thing?
Seeing more of the kids, actually. It's been really nice. So you don't have all that commute time, apart from when they're trying to run in and do a sort of BBC News on you. Rest of the time, they're pretty good, to be honest. So, okay. Shall we start? Do we think we've got enough people here yet? Still.
The comment about making great friends with my succulents, but they aren't great conversationalists.
Nice. Cool. Okay, I think we're going to start a few minutes after 7. So, quick introduction to ProductTank for those who haven't been before. So ProductTank, we've been running these for probably about 3 years now. And ProductTank is a sort of global network of meetups for people who are involved in product or who like interested in doing product. You can't see it, but the background of our thing here is actually showing all of the different product tanks around the world. There's over 180 now. So there are loads. There you go. Okay, if you just want to move on to the next slide. Oh, don't forget to use the hashtag tonight, ProductTank Bristol, and tweet us at ProductTankBRI. That would be great. Cool. Yeah, 150 plus cities. I think that slide's out of date now. There's even more. So wherever you are, there's a ProductTank if you fancy a busman's holidays. So apart from the meetups, we also have Mind the Product, the people behind ProductTank also have a newsletter, which is worth subscribing to. We also have a blog, and if you're interested in writing to the blog, then you can just email that email address there, and they'll give you some support on helping make your article even better. It's worth joining the Slack. Loads of great product people on there. If you've got a question, you can usually get an answer pretty quick, and there's jobs posted on there, all kinds of stuff. And if you want to speak at the next ProductTank Bristol, then email Lily on the email address there, whether that's you want to speak or there's a topic you want to hear about, or there's somebody that you think would be a great speaker for us and you want us to try and see if we can get in touch with them. Have a look and get in touch. Okay, moving on. So people mind the product also run training. I've probably all been in that moment of like, WTF am I doing? So if that's you, certainly been me in the past, then have a look at the URL there, and there's loads of different training courses and workshops that you can have a look at. Cool. So tonight we've got 3 great speakers. Firstly, we've got Phil Osmond, who is going to be speaking about kind of focusing teams on outcomes instead of outputs. John Holloway going to be talking about the very personal world of personalization, and Rebecca kindly joining us from Systems Advice because she hasn't had very much to do the last couple of weeks, and she's talking about what I learned from scaling a team fast. Also tonight, some people may have heard there's the kind of clap for the NHS, which is a kind of thing to show appreciation for the NHS and all the kind of the staff who are working hard in the NHS to keep us all safe. So what we're going to do, that's happening at 8 o'clock. So depending how we're doing on time, that might fall kind of partway through one of the talks, but probably would have done all the talks by then. But if it does, we'll take a break so that people who want to do that can take part. Or if it's during the Q&A, we'll take part. We'll do the clap then. So that's it. Have I missed anything, team? Okay, I think that's a no. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over to capable hands of Phil. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Darwin. Great to be with you guys this evening, albeit in a virtual capacity. I must confess, the title on the initial slide there is wrong. My apologies to Rebecca Gray. I'm not going to do a worse version of the talk that you did a few weeks back. I'm going to do something completely and totally different. 3 Ps for product people. And having it virtually means that I'm unable to crack the amazing joke that you're all going to get 3 Ps. If we'd been there in Bristol, I could have handed out some tins of peas, etc. too. Unfortunately, my marketing budget doesn't stretch to posting 3 Ps to all of you. So just have to have the real deal instead. This is a presentation really born of my own experience, really, of starting new product positions and working on new products. It's I've been around in the technology industry for about 20 years now, if you count creating small hokey web pages in Notepad in 1998, and for the last 10 years been working in products. So this is really aimed at all product people starting on a new product, whether that's a brand new product, whether that's a new product in your organization, whether you're moving into a new position and working on an established product. I think this is applicable for all of us because current apocalypse notwithstanding, we hope that in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, each of us will be potentially moving into a new product role. So hopefully this will be of some help to some of you this evening. I've got 3 very simple headings, really, and some of you may recognize them from Marty. I don't quite know who got them first, of course, but Marty's the better looking one of the two of us, so I'll let him have it. First of all, start with people. Start with people. Second, get stuck into the product. And then thirdly, never forget the process. Never forget the process. So what does it mean to start with people? We're all product people here this evening, I think, and if you're not a product person, welcome. I think being a product person means that we really need to be a bit of a people person, that we need to be good at talking to people, we need to be good at understanding people, we need to be good at empathizing with people and getting along with people. And I believe that that starts with our teams. Whether you're a product owner and you've got a squad of developers or a scrum team, or whether you're a product manager with a wider team all working on the same product, these guys are our guys. They are the guys on the ground. They're the guys that know the product. They're the guys that will know the users as well. And, well, ideally they will. And those they will become our allies as we get our teeth stuck into this. But don't forget your users. you will need to find your users. We can't sit in our ivory towers, as you know, thinking and pontificating. We need to quite literally get out of the building. We need to go and find these people. If you're working for an internal company, that can be quite easy. I worked for many years for a business where I could just go downstairs and I could talk to the guys there and I could get to know them and I could understand their pain points. I could understand what makes them tick. I could understand their metrics, where they're aiming, what they believe in. If you're working on a consumer product, then it can be a bit harder, of course. You need to get out there. You need to actually really talk to people. You need to understand your market, etc. And that can't be done from the confines of your own home, although at the moment, maybe it needs to be. But there are some good resources out there to help us do that. If you're in B2B, of course, that can be slightly harder. Often in B2B, we have this. We have the sales team gatekeepers who want to keep us dirty product people away from the customers, just in case we ask them awkward questions or, you know, reveal the true roadmap potentially. Sorry to all salespeople out there, but don't be tempted to hide behind your salespeople. Get in there, find ways of understanding your users and understanding not just the people that are buying your software, but the people that are using it as well. And talking of sales, that leads me on to these guys, the stakeholders. You find many of these people at barbecues. They're there holding a steak, enjoying it quite nicely with a couple of bits of bread. But I'm talking about stakeholders in a business. And these are the guys who are often hidden within the business, perhaps higher up. If you're in a big business, they can be potentially hard to track down. And they have a stake. They have an interest in the product. Of course, in a startup, it's often easier. You find the founders or the founder, and they're very close to the product, the problem, the customers, and everything that's going on. But that doesn't necessarily make it any easier. These people are often big personalities, and they often have very firm ideas. And it's not an easy task sometimes trying to understand these leaders and these stakeholders, but that is part of our job. That is where we, as product people, can bring great value. So if you're a new product person, you're starting working on a new product, get to know your team, get to know your users, but also get to know your stakeholders. And if you're looking for some inspiration and advice, then you could do no worse than checking out Emily Tate, who was speaking at Mind the Product Engage in Manchester earlier this year, talking about stakeholder management. Excellent presentation there. There is a link to it at the bottom of the slide, and I'm sure we'll share the slides around later. Otherwise, a Google search will reveal the same information. So there you go. Start with people. Second, get stuck into that product. What does it mean to get stuck into your product? I think, you know, as product people, we kind of understand this kind of stuff. Well, you know, that's the basics, Phil. Thank you very much. But I would just cover two things here. One is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And two, what does success look like? What's the problem you're trying to solve? You know, what are your users? What are your customers trying to do? Who does it serve? Who are these people? Hopefully you've found that out by now. And how does it fit into the mission of your organization? Perhaps it's even time for a test drive. Perhaps you should sign up if you haven't already done so and give it some welly. What does success look like? What does success look like for your company? What does success look like for your product? And most importantly, what does success look like for you? How will you be measured? The guys at Amplitude recently, I noticed they've written a book, an ebook on their North Star framework. I do like the explanation of the North Star metric by Sean Ellis. This as the metric which best captures the core value that your product delivers to its customers. So, does your product have one of those? If it doesn't, can you create one? Can you identify one? Can you get people focused on that one particular metric? Food for thought. And again, this is where we as product people, we can bring extra value from our experience and from the products that we've worked on in the past, from the continuous learning that we're doing, that we can bring this value into the new product that we're starting to work on. So what problem is it trying to solve? And what does success look like? But then, thirdly, never forget the process. I think the things that we talked about so far, starting with people, talking about your product, these are all fairly easy things to wrap our heads around. And, you know, they're sort of the basics of product management, yet they still need to be done well. And, you know, there is real scope for doing these things better and continually improving. But what about this gnarly thing of the process? Some of you might be going, well, Phil, you know, let's just check the comments. Why on earth don't you start with process? You know, surely you need a process. Well, not least, Marty Kagan, of course, inspired version 2. He puts process after people and after the product. But I believe that's where it sits, because process should be there to serve, not to be served. Process should be the foundation of what we do as product people. And, you know, that can be hard because there are many people that have lots of different ideas on process. Well, you should be doing this, you know, particularly kind of leaders in the organization. In some places where perhaps it's more of a feature factory, they have a very clear idea of what should be happening and how handoffs should be happening and all these kind of things. And, you know, sometimes these sort of processes become a substitute for trust. Now, I'm not saying that happens all over the place, and I'm not saying that that is always what's happening when you have kind of lots of process. Sometimes there's a danger that lots of process is there because people just don't trust each other. And that's something that we just have to be aware of when we start a new position and we start working on a new product. And again, this is the value that we can bring as people-centered, product-centric people, that we can trust people. There's, you know, it can't be ignored though that the cost of poor process can have quite a drag where people are involved. I'm reminded of this tweet from John Cutler earlier in the year. He's talking about technical debt, of course, massively underestimated the cost of people coming to work knowing that things are broken and fearing the next thing breaking. But, you know, I think the same can apply to called organizational debt, cultural debt. I know that he wrote an article earlier last year or at the end of last year on sort of cultural or organizational debt as well. And it's something that as product people, if we're not careful, I believe the process can trip us up. So therefore, if the process is to serve us, and if it is crucial, how can we approach this as new product people? I just want to give you two things. One of them is being open-minded, but also being critical. Keep an open mind. Good to stand back. You know, there's these things about kind of, you know, what do you do in your first 30 days as a product person? What do you do in your first 90 days? And a lot of that is learning. A lot of that is trying to understand what is going on, what our users are doing, what our teams are doing, how the organization ticks. And that's what we need to be doing. And that's why the first two, starting with people and focusing on the product, are so important. That as we do this, we can make lots of notes, we can make lots of mental notes, but we must be careful not to jump straight in and try and change the process. Listen, watch, learn, and digest. But then we can start thinking a little more critically and thinking about how we can change things. And of course, in agile settings, we have our retrospectives where we can get together with the team. And by the way, product owners, you should be at that meeting. If you're not there, then that's something to bring up. Quite how you do it at your retrospective if you're not there, I don't quite know. But you know, let's talk to your Scrum Master. You know, this is a perfect opportunity for us to start putting things in and talking to our team members about them. And then in the way that Scrum is transparent, based on empiricism, inspection, adaptation, then we can start trying things and start working on things. Even if you're not doing Scrum, apply the same kind of functionality, the same approach. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying that it will be swimming. In fact, it can be very hard, particularly where you've got an established product and an established business, an established team. Particularly, I know a few people who are going into places soon where there isn't really much of a focus on product management, as it were. And this is a hard thing to try and understand the way people are currently thinking and then change that to become more product centric. I want to encourage you that it is possible, and there are ways of doing it. There isn't one size that fits all. Of course, there's no silver bullet. There will be a number of different things that you've taken from different places, and not everything will work for every situation. But again, this is the value that we bring as product people working on a new product. So therefore, experiment, assess, learn, repeat. At the end of the day, it's just like product management. So I just want to remind us there. We've talked about people, we talked about product, and we talked about process. Trust by default. Keep it transparent. Put people first. There we go. Got them in slightly different words there. I've told you what I was going to tell you. I've told you all the stuff as we've gone along, and now I'm telling you what I've told you. How about that? Put your people first. Love your product, and grow your process. How are we doing for time? It says 20 minutes on my timer. Goodness me. Have I been going 20 minutes? I don't think I have. Feels more like 10. Anyway, so you've got some time back. Sorry if I rush through that, but thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening. And, if you want to get in contact with me, I'm afraid you won't find me on Twitter for, I don't know why, I'm just not there. But I am on LinkedIn, and I have been writing on Medium, not recently, but you can find me there. And do get in touch. I'll be very happy to talk to anybody about any of the things that have come up here or the situations we're going into. And, if you're not in product and you want to join product, give me a shout. I'm very happy to talk to people on that. And if you're moving to a new product and working in a new situation, also give me a shout. Very happy to talk to you there as well. So thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil. That was excellent. So for people who are watching, we have a bit of time for questions. So the easiest way to ask questions is if people can just post them as comments on YouTube, and then we'll see them through there. So just going to give people a second to see if they've got any questions. And also, if any of the co-organisers have any questions as well, feel free to shout in the chat.
See a few there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great job, Phil. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad it's helped a few people. I said that either this evening I'll make a complete and total fool of myself, or I'll impart some wisdom. So what's not to like either way, to be fair. You may even get both.
Are there particular types of organisations that you think do these things well? Is it something that comes from leadership, or does it come from the team level? Where do you think this kind of starts?
I think organisations that are willing to learn and grow,
yeah,
and leaders that are willing to, even as Barry O'Reilly would put it, unlearn.
Yeah.
Those are the organisations that do it well. Organisations that think, we can still do things like it was, 2010.
Yeah.
Are perhaps not going to do as well with product people.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you've got the old delivery teams and feature teams dichotomy as well, where often there's a product owner, there's a product person, but really all that's happening is that they're a handoff manager.
Yeah.
They're organizing priorities. They're playing Tetris, if you like, with the different tickets and trying to get them in. And that's just a small tip of the iceberg, if you like, that product management involves. If there's no empowerment there, if there is no real involvement with what the users actually need or what problems you're trying to solve, then I think you may get some good product people in to start with, but then you may well lose them.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to somebody who's kind of in one of those organisations, perhaps where they're not working in an empowered team, but they want to make a difference as much as they can do? Do you think? Yeah.
I think starting with asking various questions really is a great place to start, and not just of your team, but also going back up to your stakeholders and the leaders as well. Really try to understand what other people are trying to achieve. If you've got one particular department, say marketing, for example, and they're putting in lots of requests, just try and understand where they're going, what their priorities are, and what they're trying to do, so that rather than just being a dumb waiter, as it were, that you're able to help them and to really try and key into what their objectives are and advise as well. If they are talking about one particular thing and you perhaps think that something else could be done, why not throw it into the mix? I think, you know, we just have to be empathetic here, and we have to try and learn and listen. And rather than being wallflowers, it might make us a little bit kind of, you know, oh goodness, what's he going on again? I think, you know, as product people, we do have to have a little bit of a, you know, a salty taste to us. You know, we do need to kind of, you know, some people may not like listening to us.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the course. We can't be all things to all men.
Absolutely. So just skimming through the comments on, here's one from Lily. You can probably see that on the screen below.
Oh, yeah. When should you start to make changes? If not day 30, what are the signs that you know enough? That is a great question. I think it will vary from, there you go, the classic Mind the Product podcast response. It depends, really. It will depend on your situation. It will depend on the maturity of the team. It will depend on the maturity of the business. I think when you build up your relationships with people and you start with your team, then, you know, I think you'll get a feeling on that. And that could be... could be day 2, to be fair, if they're in a real dire strait. But just not on day 1. Just not on day 1. I think that's where your intuition and your wisdom comes into play, and the old empathy muscle.
Makes sense. Yeah, sounds good. And then the other question was around what was the book that you're plugging in?
This is the classic Marty Kagan inspired version 2. Let's see if I can move that the right way for the camera.
Okay, yeah. Great book. And then follow-up question, which just appeared, yeah. What other books do you recommend?
It's a very good point. I was trying to show someone this book the other day, and I couldn't find it on my bookshelf. User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton.
Great book.
Jeff Patton is he's on a crusade to save the world from bad product management and bad product owners. And there's actually a really good video out there. 5 ways to fix product ownership, and I did allude to it on one of my slides. And the big thing, the number one thing he says, is stop treating the product owner like the customer. As product owner, you're actually part of the team.
Yep.
You succeed or fail with that team. You're not the customer. You don't just dive in and drop bombs and requests and stuff. You are part of that team, and it's your job to understand the real customer and the real users. And, you know, he does allude that in here. And if you do a Google search, or even if you go to his site, 5 ways to fix agile product ownership, well worth watching.
Sounds great. Any other questions coming through on the comments? I think that is okay. I think that's all the questions. So big thank you, Phil. That was excellent. It's a weird thing about doing this remotely. You can't hear anyone clapping, but I'm sure people are clapping at home.
I'll open my window at 8 o'clock. There might be some claps.
Yeah.
Not for me, though, of course.
No. Brilliant. So next up we have John. So John is a sort of technical product owner and product consultant and general product coach. He's got lots of great wisdom. So John, are you ready? Here we go, coming up.
Okay.
Brilliant. Over to you. If you're
Can I just check? Can everybody see my screen okay?
Just coming up now. There we go.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Hello, everybody. I hope all is well in our new world, as virtual as this is. I think it's actually a kind of really great way to actually kind of do a kind of like conference and see a set of talks. So hopefully this will be kind of interesting and appropriate. I'm just going to start a timer because I've got a funny feeling I'm going to run out of time with this one. But anyway, what I wanted to talk to you about is really data, what that means as a product manager, and specifically the data space, data scientists, data engineers, and how you interact with those teams and the kind of estate as a whole, the applications, and how that relates back to your end user. So I do some work with kind of startup scale-ups, just a little, but mostly it's kind of early stage startups where it's product management kind of like problems coupled with data, and then the kind of technology parts almost come later. I train with Mind the Product, so I also teach kind of foundations and product metrics, of which this came out as a more of a deep dive into kind of product metrics and looking at some of the other kind of concepts that came out of the course we teach. So I specifically here want to talk about quantitative data, and being data informed means taking quantitative data and qualitative data, obviously, to generate insight which may be useful to influence user decisions. And really what I want to do is to try and make sense of this, which is, you may have heard of the concept of a data lake and what that means. There's a lot of moving parts within it, and there's lots of different people that interact with it. And this can be a complete mess within a given organization. It can be a joy to work with in other organizations, depending on how you've built that out. So specifically, I want to basically cover an end-to-end process of starting a data project with some suggestions and tips, where I've ended up being a consultant within that kind of analytics kind of space. And I want to talk about the hierarchy of data needs. So very much like Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, we're going to talk about how you can't just build machine learning kind of models off the bat without kind of really understanding the data you've got. And then I'm going to touch on some of the tech involved in that, and then the data team and how they work with this. I won't cover statistics or predictive analytics in any great depth, but I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about that. So most of you will be familiar with this kind of setup, which is you have a mobile or a desktop app with Google Analytics, and you have some server that kind of processes that data and stores it in the database. And users may be using your app to perform a job, which involves storage of some data in some way, and possibly visualization of that. And Google Analytics is the de facto kind of easy to implement solution for collecting behavioral data about your application. And that's great because we can come up with our kind of our funnel, look at all the different kind of events within that funnel, and try and optimize each part of that funnel to actually drive the user towards the converted to some sort of kind of like revenue or sale, if that's your kind of one metric that matters, if you're an e-commerce business or whatever else. So aside from kind of optimizing your site and user experience, I mean, that's all great and increasing revenue that way. I wanted to touch on some of the more complex kind of situations you might have. So specifically with this, let's go a little bit deeper and look at an e-commerce site, for example, where we're interested in the set of events that occur for our users. So that might be them looking at a product, adding a product to a basket, applying a coupon code maybe, and then adding a kind of cross-sell kind of product that's popped up within their kind of their shopping experience, and then checking out. And kind of for an e-commerce site or a travel site, it's roughly the same, but you're trading off kind of your products for your ancillary services like a seat assignment or in-flight meal and things like that. So I've had experience with both those industries, from an application stack, optimizing that kind of funnel, and then trying to upsell services off the back of that. But fundamentally, what we want to look at is getting more insight. So understanding our user behavior at a deeper level. So, for example, with a travel site, we might be looking at the order of hotels that are, or cars in terms of car hire, that are presented to a user, and whether that has significance in terms of actually converting them to actually purchase the ancillary service. We might be looking at the best set of items to advertise to the user when it comes to cross-selling the products, and which ones to advertise and which one have the most effect. You can't really kind of do some of the more complex stuff with just Google Analytics, and you need something a little bit more kind of like powerful than that. And when you're starting kind of one of these projects, what I've typically found is that what you do and how you started and which questions you ask are kind of very important in terms of making sure that project is a success. Because if you don't get that bit right, the latter part is going to be a complete disaster in terms of when you're interfacing with the teams and asking them what to build in the application and what to actually do on the data side in terms of building kind of pipelines or models in that sense. So I'll give you kind of a set of examples of kind of problems we faced in the past on projects. So a large retailer a couple of years ago, we dealt with a search engine that was there for providing fairly kind of trivial kind of search filter kind of via kind of facets, etc., to allow the user to find what they want on the actual site. But what we wanted to do was dynamically manage those kind of facets and look at dynamically providing cross-sell and upsell opportunities for products based on specific kind of arrangements of products, based on propensity, which is fundamentally looking at what a customer has purchased in the past and what they might purchase in terms of probability later down the line, but also external conditions, so offering sales at specific points or using external factors such as weather. So that's one example. Two other examples there. We had a project with kind of analytics data for thousands of flight bookings and ancillary services like hotels, and we needed to work out the best kind of order of those hotels in order to drive conversion, which, yeah, fairly standard. And then thirdly, looking at financial transactions for a user and basically providing advice on spending habits. So that was fundamentally using open banking data and giving them advice on what they've spent. So this is pretty typical these days with things like Monzo and Starlink, kind of banks like that, in terms of your spending advice. We're looking at this slightly differently at the moment in a different sector and tailoring that to specific kind of like cases. So we're going to focus on a key kind of like data question here, which is which products would a customer potentially buy based on previous behavior, and that typically is called product propensity. So running this project from the start in the consultancy space with an analytics firm, the key thing we found was we had to basically divide up discovery and development, much like you would in the product world anyway. But the discovery phase was really talking with the client and the stakeholders and really understanding the business, because a lot of the businesses would come to us and ask, okay, well, we need a fixed cost for a project, and they wanted it to kind of cover both, but without understanding not just the use cases, but looking at the data they had and also looking at the data estate and the different departments that interacted with that. It could often be a complete disaster of a project whereby somebody had quoted 2 weeks to actually build the whole thing, and the 2 weeks that were there was spent in meetings or really trying to kind of get access to the data and being able to kind of make sense of that data, which as a consultancy is probably the kind of the killer in terms of revenue on the project, etc. So if the data state is a mess in a given company, and that means kind of missing data, multiple data sources, large amounts of data they need processing. We had one horror story where somebody had quoted 2 days to actually kind of look at the airline and the hotel related data, store it in the database, and then do the analysis on it and provide them back with the results. When we got the data, we found out there was 2 terabytes worth of data, which in itself took a week to process on its own, let alone kind of actually do the kind of hardcore kind of data science part of that. So that's where the killer comes, and companies aren't necessarily kind of forthcoming with this information. They expect you to kind of pick up the pieces afterwards, which is a little unfair, but it does happen. So discovery really is identifying the stakeholders, generating a set of hypotheses or scenarios that you'd like to kind of investigate with them, and then picking one of those and actually using it to drive out the data estate and what it might look like if they don't have a data estate today. And that might be, if they do have a data estate, part of the discovery phase would be getting not just product, but kind of engineering in the room and getting them to identify where the data sources are today, who the owners are of that, and the location of the data and applications. And then a key part of that is actually looking at the data itself, which sounds a bit nuts, because you'd assume that you do that anyway, but not everybody does. And particularly if the data resides in 3 or 4 different places, and you need to join that data together in order to kind of perform your to get the data set that you need to do some work. And like I said, prioritizing one of those scenarios to actually explore, and hopefully choosing one that has maximum benefit to the business, coupled with reasonable effort. The lower the better. Once you've proven that, you can start, you've won the trust of the business, and you can start investigating some of the more complex kind of scenarios. Development. So I split this into kind of 4 different kind of areas. So you don't have the data, so you need to kind of get that data from somewhere by instrumenting your apps, mobile apps, web apps, in order to kind of generate that data and send it to a reasonable kind of database or sink, so that you can then explore the data, validate or invalidate your hypothesis, and then build some sort of solution that might be a kind of machine learning model, which you can then productionize. And there's a fair few problems in that productionization part. So you can look this up. This is a standard kind of diagram for the hierarchy of kind of data needs. And what it means is fundamentally you have to understand and collect your data, store it before you can actually kind of explore and transform that into a reasonable data set for them working with, and to validate your hypothesis, and to really understand the kind of the build the data science kind of like solution. So if you don't actually have the data, you need to go out and actually kind of collect it. And I'm basically going to choose an example here, which is based on kind of a typical Google stack. And that really looks like this. So we've got a situation at the moment where we've got a mobile app, and we need to generate events from that. And we've used Google Analytics for Firebase and instrumented the entire app to understand the kind of the funnel. And that's things from like, viewing a product, adding product to basket, applying coupon. Those are the kind of events that we're trying to actually identify. And those key events we can then use to kind of collect data, and then perform a kind of like data science kind of part. The problem with that is that your client-side data, it can often be inaccurate. There are some accuracy problems with it. So we couple the client-side data with the server-side data and instrument the app for things that are harder to measure. So things like kind of payment, things that would happen behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily see in a client. You've also got the problem that people can disable kind of like cookies, and they can mess with the experience, which means your data isn't necessarily accurate, or as accurate as it could be. So what happens then is that data ends up being sent to Firebase, which is a way of kind of storing the data and looking at the funnel of the different events. And the application side data is sent somewhere else. So the cool thing about kind of Firebase in this is that you can take your events and you can dump them out to another kind of data source, which is highly sophisticated for querying large amounts of data and being able to kind of generate insight from it. And that's something called BigQuery. So some of you might have heard that. I won't go into the technical details, but fundamentally it's a columnar database that allows you to store kind of like terabytes worth of data, and then actually kind of query that data and combine different sources. So it's a bit different to your standard database that you would use in an e-commerce or a travel kind of experience, in the sense that is optimized for kind of placing orders in an efficient manner. And this is more about storing it so that it can be kind of queried in weird and wonderful ways. So we have our data in kind of BigQuery, and we've decided to take the clickstream data and the back end kind of server-side data, and we can now involve the data team to look at investigating our kind of hypothesis. So for that was product propensity. So given a given user with a certain profile, based on what they've done historically in the past, what they've purchased, what are they likely to purchase in the future? And the two key roles on the kind of that kind of like team that will investigate that are the data engineer and the data scientist. And the engineer is almost a specialized form. So application engineers fundamentally building out your mobile web app and the server-side app. These engineers are very much there to stand up the infrastructure with big data processing. They're there to kind of provide cleaning and reshaping of that data using that kind of big data kind of approach. And they will work with the data scientist, who is there to kind of look at your hypothesis, explore that, and build some sort of model which takes a set of inputs and spits out relevant outputs. And for product propensity, that would be a score for the customer that we can then use to compare to other customers, and then at least provide some sort of kind of similarity scoring so that we can work out which products they might buy as a result of it. So the key things to take away with this, at least on the data science side, as a product manager, is very much the difference between regression and classification, and that I think that's important to understand, because I think lots of engineers struggle with it as it is. But regression is about predicting a value, and classification is about taking. A good example of this would be, you've got a taxi kind of cab fare kind of ride, and you're trying to predict the cost of that, or what it would be. Whereas classification, think of it as you've got a kind of a bird feeder in the garden, and you've collected data on all kind of like manner of kind of different birds. And when a bird flies onto that kind of table, you take a photo of it and you try and work out which kind of type of bird that is. So that's kind of, you know, basic machine learning concepts. So I think a key thing here is that your data that you might get, your clickstream data or your application data, it might not be in the right shape. So your data engineer is fundamentally going to look at reshaping the data. And this is akin, you can think of this as akin to just using Google Sheets or Excel, in the sense that you use group by or you use filter, and they're just doing that on a much larger scale. They will look at cleaning the data, partitioning that data, and aggregating that data into different forms. So for basically kind of flights and hotel bookings, you could group by the given kind of like origin and kind of destination, and kind of shape the data in that way to make it easier to query. The pipeline is what a data engineer creates. They're using that kind of pipeline to take input data and process it in those kind of ways through a set of steps, and then spit that out into another location. So in that sense, it might be BigQuery again. So you're taking raw data, processing it, stuffing it into BigQuery for kind of for use, or it might be taking the data and put it into another data source. That might be your database that you're actually using with the website, or it might be something like Elasticsearch, which is a kind of search index which is highly optimized to kind of to use as searching them in a kind of flexible manner. The final part of this is obviously building the model itself. And for a data scientist, what they're looking at doing is collecting historical click events and application events, purchase events on the server side, combining that data and looking at who purchased what, when, and what with what else, and then creating a model for actually scoring customers according to that data. And they will take the entire data set, of which is, it might be tens of thousands of rows. You think of large retailers, they may be doing 2,000, 3,000 orders a day. And they are looking across that entire data set. And they will typically take 80% of the data and train a model on it, and then take the other 20% and use that to validate the actual kind of the model. So in terms of product propensity, like I said, you know, what we're looking to do is basically spit out a kind of customer score there. And that's fundamentally the journey from beginning to end with a kind of data project. Thank you very much. I probably finished a bit early, so yeah, over to yourselves for kind of questions. Thank you very much. If you want to get in touch with me, then LinkedIn is probably the best, or Twitter, or yeah, there's my direct website as well. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Nice one, John. That was great. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Very clear and to the point. Thank you. So let's have a look. Do we have any questions coming on the YouTube? Okay, question from Lily. How do you get your data events well named?
Oh, okay. So typically in Firebase Analytics, you get the chance there to actually kind of name the event as it starts off. So you will tag the event, and then you'll associate that with either numeric. There's normally a type, so it could be a field like a category, or it could be a kind of just a raw number. So for example, view product, you're looking at you're basically looking at just counting the number of kind of times that product's been viewed. So you'll send view product with a kind of numeric value, and then some sort of identifier, which might be the kind of product SKU or something like that.
Yeah. So do you normally have sort of naming conventions and document those somewhere?
Yeah, it's typically called a data dictionary, which is something I didn't cover there, but I should have. And that is a way of making sense of your data and building metadata that describes your original data.
Cool. Great. Any other questions at the minute? Do you have a blog where people can read more about your kind of techniques and things?
Yeah, I'm on Medium. I publish bits and pieces towards data science. So the last thing I did was on a data tool for cleaning called Pandas in the Python world. I write a little bit about that, but way more about the kind of product technology and building effective teams, and yeah, those the kind of thorny problems that I've run into with founders and startups.
Great, cool. Okay, well, I think what we're going to do now is have a short break before we do Rebecca's talk. That will give people a chance to grab a beer, stretch their legs, or a cup of tea, and get some food and snacks. Afraid we can't provide the pizza tonight. That's on you. And also, if people want to do the NHS clap for our carers, it is a real thing. I did Google it. Top tip, don't Google NHS clap. You get an interesting search history. It's not the results I was looking for, but it is a real thing. I'll put the link into the chat. So that's 8 o'clock. People are being encouraged to kind of clap and cheer to show some appreciation for the NHS and everyone working in the kind of caring sector as well, who are working so hard at the moment. And with that in mind, if you're enjoying tonight, obviously, you know, we're all pretty fortunate. But there are people who are having it a lot worse than us, particularly people who are homeless at the moment. So I'd really encourage people to make a donation to the Caring Bristol Emergency Appeal, and I'll put the link on YouTube. They're trying to raise money so they can keep their shelter open and provide housing and support for people who are homeless at this difficult time. And it looks like I'm getting the full BBC News experience. This is my daughter Freya, who wants to come and say hello to everybody. There you go. You're actually live on the internet, Freya. Do you want to say hello? No, a bit shy. Okay. All right. Well, with that, then I think we should take time for a break, and we will reconvene so that people have time to do the clap for our carers thing. We'll reconvene at sort of just after 8 o'clock, sort of 8:05. So grab a drink and see you soon. Thanks very much. So thanks everybody. Hope you had a chance to refresh and grab a drink, and hopefully do the clap for the NHS and our carers. So in a minute we're going to hand over to Rebecca, who's head of online journeys for Citizens Advice, and we're super grateful to Rebecca for taking time to join us tonight. She's had a really busy time at the moment. So how are you doing, Rebecca? You're back from doing your clap?
I am back. I did a clap. It's really moving here. There's so many people hanging out the window and on the street. It's really lovely.
Oh, that's great. There's not so many houses where I am, so we could hear some other people, but not that many. So hopefully other people could hear people as well.
Good. Did Freya have a good clap?
She did, and her sister Livy. They all wanted to stay and be on air again, but I've shooed them out for now. Before it goes to their heads. So how are you doing? Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll without further ado, I'll hand over to you. Thanks very much, Rebecca.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much for having me. My friend Ella spoke at this event, an in-person one, a few months ago, and had great things to say. So I'm glad to be following in her footsteps. So as you've heard, my name is Rebecca Kemp, and I'm the Director of Customer Journey at Citizens Advice. Customer Journey, I think we might be the only team with that name. What it basically is digital product and design. And we call it Customer Journey because that's the thing we really want to be focusing on as an organisation. I was scheduled to talk, well, Darwin and I had batted around a few ideas. I think I was down to be talking about scaling a team, but instead I'm going to be talking about what we've been doing in the past couple of weeks in our team in response to the coronavirus situation, because it seems really topical, and I thought it would be interesting to people who maybe don't work in a same kind of environment that I do, to hear about what we've been up to. So I'm going to talk us through why Citizens Advice is here and how my team, the Customer Journey team, fits in, what we're up to at the moment, and what might be next. So why we're here and how my team fits in. Well, we are Citizens Advice, and we are here for everyone. What that means is we give people the knowledge and confidence that they need to find their way forward, whoever they are and whatever their problem. So as you can probably imagine, our service is very much in demand at the moment. We're actually a national network of about 280 local charities. So perhaps in your area, Citizens Advice Bristol, that would be an independent charity set up to serve your local area. And then we also operate nationally, which is where my team and I come in with the national part of the organisation. And we help people across online, phone, face-to-face, lots of different channels. And we help people primarily on topics like welfare benefits, employment, housing, money and debt, and consumer issues. And as you can probably imagine from that list, lots of people come to us with multiple issues, or if they come to us to talk about one thing, typically there will be other things that they appreciate help with as well. We actually have a dual mission. So the side of our work that we're probably best known for to the public is the advice work, but we also do advocacy because of the range of problems that we help people with, and that mix of national and local perspectives. We've got a really unique insight into the challenges that people are facing today. And we can use that evidence then to help show companies and public bodies and the government how they can make things better for people. That's not the core area that I personally work on. I work more on the advice side, as do my team, but we will come back to the advocacy side because that's something that we've been working quite a lot on, quite new to me in the past couple of weeks. So Citizens Advice was actually founded the day after the outbreak of World War II. And this is one of my favourite pictures from our history. We recently celebrated our 80th anniversary. And this is a horse box that was converted into a mobile advice station. And it was driven around to places that had been hit by the Blitz so that people could get the advice that they needed when they needed it. And that kind of face-to-face, very personal advice has always been a core part of what we do. Here is some face-to-face advice happening in the 1950s. We don't dress like that today, but I personally quite fancy going to work in one of those suits. And data has always been really, really important to what we do. This is a book from 1948 called Advising the Citizen. And what this book contained is instructions for how to advise people and also how to record it. So how to, different codes for different problems that then we could basically tally up and use that data to help advocate for solving those problems at the root. And that's informed lots of our work through history. This is a poster I love from the 80s when we were doing lots of work advocating for people, particularly around poll tax. We've also always embraced new technologies. So these are advisors using microfiche in the 1980s, which was a pretty big step forward. And then things went online, as you can probably expect, and that has led eventually to our public advice, which is the thing that lots of my team work on. This is freely available advice on all sorts of topics: benefits, work, debt, money, consumer housing, and that's used by millions of people a year. And we also have more detailed advice behind the login for our advisors. So if it is that this doesn't quite give you the level of detail, or you've got a particularly complex case, you can phone us, come into an office, talk to an advisor, and we also provide the product with that underlying advice in. So through our history, there's been these themes of understanding what people need in the moment that they need it, that we are, embracing new ways to give advice, whether that's Horsebox or microfiche or the web, and constantly evolving how we give advice locally. And these things have stood us in good stead for the past couple of weeks, which, as you can imagine, have been very challenging. So where does my team sit? Well, we, the customer journey team, we're here to help the service understand what people need, find the right ways to give advice, and we do a lot of work on the direct digital delivery as well. So we have the different kind of disciplines in that team of product delivery, got some data people, content designers, user experience designers, service designers, user researchers, and we've got a little innovation lab as well. I think that's everyone. I always forget one discipline when I'm going through it, so apologies to anyone I've forgotten. So that's kind of where we've been over the past 80 years, and we're definitely in a particular moment, of course, in the world, and that has immediate impact on our users, and of course we want to be able to respond. So in this next section, I'm going to share what it is that we're up to at the moment. It's very much work in progress. I finished off this talk this afternoon, and things will have changed since then, particularly with the announcement that have been on extra help for self-employed people. But this gives you, what I wanted to do is kind of give a bit of an honest take on what's going on and where we are. I found it super helpful myself to read what other people are up to, and particularly other people working in charities or in public service kind of work. So we're sharing it in that spirit. So what's happening across the service? Well, local citizens advice, that network across the country, and our colleagues in operations are just doing such incredible work at the moment to keep services running, and particularly to help where face-to-face provision needs to temporarily close and that be moved to phone and digital. We do have existing expertise and work already done in delivering services by phone and online, but we're doing massive channel shift very quickly for our advisors, and they're just blowing me away with what they're doing. It's absolutely amazing. Where my team comes in is we're focused particularly around creating new and updated content on coronavirus and related issues for the public and for advisors. And use of our website, mainly our public advice, so the advice for the general public to use has doubled. Last week it was twice what it was that time a year ago, and I imagine it will probably keep increasing. And people's needs are changing really quickly. So I'm going to talk a few moments to this. graph. So what our data, because of the scale of how many people we've helped, so we've had, I think, 2.2 million page views in the past week. The scale, it gives an interesting proxy for what people are worried about across the country. So you'll see, if we nerd out for a moment on this graph, and I'm going to need to do some pointing for myself. So first, you can see the green line, which is holiday and flight cancellation pages. So they started to increase slowly but steadily. So when people were starting to think, oh, you know, can I travel? Can I get my money back? And so on. But then when it became apparent that people were going to need to take time, potentially take time off work for getting sick, you can see a massive spike in the blue line. So that is all our advice on sick pay. Then you can see people starting to get worried about being made redundant, and that's the red line. So that comes slightly behind, the peak slightly behind sick pay, as it became understood how long this situation may carry on for. And then that goes down quite quickly, and it goes down after the government had begun to announce some of their measures, which meant that people were slightly less worried about redundancy. But of course, or slightly fewer people were looking for information, I should say more correctly. But then there's the yellow, which is currently peaking, and that's all our information about universal credit. So that's people who either are looking at what it means for their existing benefits changing, or whether they want to apply for universal credit for the first time as a way to get extra help during this time. So that's how the overall trends in the most used pages, that's what they're looking like. But if you see the orange, that's an example of one page which has lower use overall, but there's been a really big increase. And that's, the orange is content about what to do if you can't afford to top up your prepayment meter, so your energy meter. So that, we think, is people who are worried about not being able to afford to do that through lack of work or loss of work, or people who are worried about how to be able to do that when they're not able to leave the house. So how to keep those basic utilities running in a context of limited cash and mobility. So that's the kind of context that we are working with, and the way that we in the customer journey team are approaching it is with a multidisciplinary, agile approach, as I'm sure most of you are used to working in that are attending this kind of event. So we've got a team creating and iterating content. The people in there they are content designers, legal and policy experts, user researchers, data scientists, and delivery managers. And so they are working really, really hard to keep up with demand, iterate content based on what's working and what's not working for people, and keep up with the different measures as they're being announced. We have a peak every evening now, so after the government's announcement around 5 o'clock, there's a big rush of people to the website to understand the latest updates. So that's the content. Then the way that we get that out, we have product teams working on our advice for the public, our specific, more detailed advice product for our advisors, and also for staff on the intranet. And we use Digital Workplace, which is Facebook Workplace, which is I think it's free version of Facebook for charities to use for internal comms. And then of course we've got our highly valued platform teams providing the technology and keeping all of this up and running while we're having all this massive spike in traffic. So that's what we're doing behind the scenes. And then there's this extra element, which I have to say is new to me, which is where the advocacy side of Citizens Advice's work comes in. So as I explained, our data gives an interesting map of what people might be worried about or what they're looking for help on, which is something that we're using in our advocacy work. Citizens Advice is using to share and show government, companies, other bodies what the public is interested in at the moment. And so while we've been frantically working behind the scenes to get this stuff ready, it's also been on the news, which is really unusual. It's not not normal to have your product on the news. And so we've had in the top left, there's my colleague, our chief analyst Tom, who was talking through very similar, the same figures that I just explained to you on BBC News. Was it yesterday lunchtime, or was it the day before? I'm not sure. I've lost track a bit, to be perfectly honest. Oh no, it was the day before, because then last night they were on the same data was on Peston in the evening. Again, the same story about what people are looking for. So as well as actually providing that advice, analysing it, and iterating based on what's working and what isn't, that's also been fed into our advocacy work and being on the telly at the same time, which is unusual and exciting. So that's the bit where we're doing loads of rapid work, and it's relatively clear what we're doing. We've got things set up, people have reprioritised their work, we've got ways of working in place. But then there are other things within our team, so kind of next step back from that, where we're still in the reprioritisation process, particularly in the innovation lab. So they are a small multidisciplinary team that do rapid prototyping and usually 2 to 3 week experiments of ideas that we think can help our service, whether it's helping our users or help our advisors. So we are at the moment, not literally at the moment because it's the evening, but the past couple of days, reprioritising their experiment roadmap to look at new things that can help in these new situations. We're pondering moving from 2 to 3 week experiments to moving to just 1 week sprints, but we'll see. And we're also looking at what our seamless customer journey team do. They're a team who looks at our overall experience and service design. And of course, like the lot of you, we've been doing all of this while moving to remote working, trying to stay in touch, trying to learn what that's like. We're relatively well set up with our tools and ways of working to have some of us remote, but all of us remote is new. So we've been doing lots of things, particularly kind of team time, to get together and keep our spirits up and look after each other. This is me, or a slightly different angle to my living room, doing a talk to the team a couple of days ago when we had a virtual all hands. And we're sharing kind of breakdowns of lots of the things we're doing there, particularly if you follow me on Twitter, so at Rebecca Kemp, which is on the beginning and the end of these slides. We're sharing literally how we're doing it. So if they are the kind of things that you're interested in doing for your team, you can just nick that, try it out, and hopefully share back what you've learned and what is better. So next up for the team, here's my hunch of what we're going to be doing for the next, what we're going to be focusing on for the next days and weeks. So carrying on with the advice content, collaborating with the network and operations colleagues, doing more of the latter to help understand how we can help them. We're going to keep working in the open and doing things like this talk, blogging about our data, sharing what we do. We find it really helpful to learn what other people are doing, so we want to share in that way. And also I think it's really important that in this time, particularly in the charity sector, or those of us working in tech for good roles, that lots of us will be facing the same problems, and whether it's recruiting more volunteers or helping with channel shift or anything that this situation has popped up or made a priority. So we want to make sure we're approaching things more efficiently, which probably will mean collaborating and different people leading on different problems, which we want to participate in. And last but not least, staying well in ourselves, being able to adjust to caring responsibilities in our new living situations, and also making sure that we are able to stay well and be in this for the long haul as a team, because what we really don't want to happen is, us all burning out next week when we know that we need to be around to respond to coronavirus and its aftermath, because people are going to still need our help for quite a while. So that's a little summary of where we are, where we've come from, and why Citizen Advice is here, and how the customer journey team and people who do jobs like those of you who are listening, how we fit in, a bit about what we're doing at the moment, and then my sense of what might be next. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. That was super interesting. Thank you. I'm going to be selfish and take the first question, but when you're trying to reprioritize so many things at speed and at scale like that, do you have any tips for that? Has that been hard? Have people just been quite open about revisiting priorities? What's that?
Great question. People have been amazing, really open to prioritizing, and I'd say if anything, the challenge is that loads of people want to help, but at the moment we can't. We're still figuring out what will be the best ways for people in the team to change their work and do different things. So as I said, with the content, it's relatively clear what we need to do, whereas with other parts of the team, we're really going to be responding to what's going on in the network and with our operational staff. So that's still a bit unclear. But people are being patient with myself and senior colleagues as we, work to figure that out based on the changing situation. What I will say is something that's really been paying dividends, and which I'm really pleased with, is that we have done as a team lots of work to define our mission, how we understand how we contribute to citizens' advice, how do we interact, get to know each other, understand each other's priorities and disciplines, and so on. And that has absolutely paid dividends. That has made it so much easier to be able to reprioritize, because we already know each other and we are relatively good at working together and collaborating. So I would say that's really made this whole thing a lot easier.
And that's stuff that you'd been doing already beforehand, so you had that to draw on.
Yeah.
And so there's a question, how are you sharing up-to-date information with your advisors in a world that is changing daily? How do you get that?
We have it's a great question. We have a product called AdvisorNet. So we have our public advice, which is online for everyone to see, and then behind that we have a login to a much more detailed bank of information and advice, which is called AdvisorNet. So that is specifically for the advisors. So we are basically updating them both. And when it comes to advisors, we also flag. We have a page so they know what has been updated, so they can see what's changing as well. So that's how we do it.
Amazing, brilliant. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or any of our panel? How many people do you have working on the kind of coronavirus area at the moment?
So within my team, we have about between 10 and 15 people working on that content. I don't know whether it's going to go up or down, but yes, that's what we've got at the moment. And they are we've pulled them together into a team with those disciplines that I explained, and then other content colleagues are working on other topics that they were working on anyway.
So imagine that kind of 5 p.m. update is quite an inconvenient cycle, because then it's just at the end of the sort of working day, then everyone's got to scramble to try and create content to support that. And then
I would like to say inconvenient, because our job is to help people. But what I will say is, whatever time of day, it's pretty constant in terms of updating the content, understanding the detail as it comes out and as things change, and also responding to that different demand that we see. And so there's definitely that kind of daily cycle in traffic, but the team are working really hard all the time, basically.
Yeah, sounds exhausting. Let's have a look on the YouTube. Lily, so you mentioned iterating on the content. Does that include A/B testing of the content?
We're not actually A/B testing right at the moment for this, but I think that's something that we would absolutely love to do. We are use Google Analytics. We have feedback buttons on our webpage. Did this work for you? I can't remember the exact question. I hope my team aren't on here. Did this advice help you solve your problem? I think is it, or did this advice help? And then more detailed questions if people get through that one and want to give us some more feedback, and also from similar things from advisors as well. And the insight we get from our advisors is amazing, because that gives us such particularly rich qualitative data from their understanding of and their experience of working directly with people.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, and if people have been inspired by what they've heard, are you hiring at the moment, or?
Yeah, yeah, we're always hiring. At the moment, we are or I should say, in our team, we've done quite a lot of hiring the last couple of years. So there are, if you Google citizens advice jobs, you'll find it. At the moment, we're looking for DevOps, technical architecture, and some other roles more on the technology side. But we are expecting to be putting out more digital and design roles over the next few weeks.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, well, I think we'll end it there, but thank you so much for that talk. That was amazing, and for all the amazing work that you're doing at the minute. And thanks everybody at home for joining us for our first ever remote ProductTank Bristol. Hopefully we'll be able to meet up again in person, but it's likely that our next event will be remote. So keep your eyes peeled for details, and there'll be an announcement via Meetup. And if you have any feedback, then you can get in touch with us via meetup.com. We're always open to ideas for how we can make these remote and in-person sessions even better. So let us know. Oh, a late question just come in from Martin. Have you considered making your advisor content open to the public?
Oh, Martin, you come in at the end with a hot topic there. Yes, it is something that we've considered. The challenge, or the reason why it's not a straightforward decision, is because when you're talking about the level of content that you're getting to with advisors, it's often quite detailed policy information. It's about the benefits system. It's about law, and it's really quite hard to make that available in a way that people will be able to understand and action. But it is definitely something that we think about all the time. And yeah, it's always the subject of some debate in the team.
Brilliant. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. We'll watch the space. So, right, we're going to wrap up there. Enjoy the rest of your evenings and take care of each other. And we'll put the link for the donation again on the comments. Please donate if you can. Take care and see you at the next one.